Whether you call it dispersed camping, boondocking, or free camping, when you are out in the middle of nowhere, you're going to need to be self-sufficient because you're not going to have access to regular campground amenities. So today, I'm going over 5 essential items you're going to need when you are on your own. The first essential thing you'll need to think about is water. Water is your #1 priority no matter where you live. But if you plan to stay off grid for any length of time, you're going to need to bring your own water or have a way to filter your water if you have a source nearby. There are so many options when it comes to water storage and filtration. Some larger RVs have huge tanks where they may have 30 gallons or more stored away and easily accessible for those kinds of situations. And some of those have complete water filtration and purification systems built into them. But if you're like me and you don't have the space for that, there are still plenty of options for you. I use these now. I used to have different storage containers. These carry about 4 liters each, which is a little under a gallon, and I have 5 of them. The reason I didn't get larger storage containers is because when they're full of water, you have to carry them and they can get rather heavy. So these are very easy for me to manage. They don't weigh very much when they're absolutely full. And they also fit in the storage area underneath here that I have for them. On average, a person needs about half a gallon of water to drink a day. And that all depends on climate and your activity level. Whether it's really hot and you're sweating a lot. So you want to calculate that based on your usage and your needs, of course. My setup gives me about a week's worth of drinking water, and I know that if I'm going to be at a higher altitude, which will require more water, or if I'm going to be in a hotter environment where I'm sweating a lot, I'm going to need more water. And if I'm not going to be going to a store or in an area where I can go to a store to get more water, or there isn't a natural source that I can filter from, I would buy an extra 5 gallons or 10 gallons depending on my needs, and then I would just give those away or recycle those containers later on. I don't normally carry a lot more than what I have. But it's good to have redundancies or other sources to purify and filter your water in case you have a natural water source that you're drawing from, or if you're not sure about the tap water that you're going to be using. And I have several methods for that. I've done other videos on this. I have a whole water purification system that I actually tested with water strips and everything, so that I do know that if I have very questionable water, I could still have pure water to drink if I needed it and to use if I needed it. And that is a bigger system that I store under my cabinet. And then I do have water straws, which is something that I have in my backpack for hiking, and that can also be used in case of an emergency or if I just need extra water. Then I have 2 different thermoses. One is a pressed thermos that has a filter in it that can purify water and filter water, and a UV thermos that uses ultraviolet light to purify water. You'll also want to calculate how much water you're going to need for cooking, bathing, and washing. For me, it really depends if I'm going to be near another source of water or not. I also minimize water usage by using these spray bottles for cleaning my dishes and using a good old-fashioned cloth and some soapy water for bathing, which conserves on water quite a bit. And if you're okay with it, I always have some baby wipes on hand that are 99% water and they don't have fragrance or anything else in them. And I figure if they're safe enough to use on a baby's bottom, they are safe enough for me to use occasionally to wipe myself down. Next, you'll want to think about food, both how you will store it and cook it. Some free campsites have fire pits, but you can't rely on that, especially if there are fire bans in an area. So bringing your own stove is essential. Some people have little tiny ones like jet boils, and there's even smaller ones that you can disassemble and carry in a backpack. I have opted to have a camp stove. It uses both gas and butane little containers, and that works fine for me. I don't use it for long periods of time. It's usually to boil my water and warm up food that I have to cook. So I'm not there for hours and hours with my stove on at any given point. So it lasts me a very long time. And I usually just continue to monitor that and pick up canisters when I can. And then there are places that you can dispose of the canisters or bring them back so that they are recycled. And as you have seen many times, it fits very well underneath my cabinet, which is another plus. I also have become very good at cooking one-pot meals over my little stove. And I do have my own little fire pit that you assemble in 4 different pieces, and it also has a grill. So when there is no fire pit and I'd like a campfire or I need somewhere to cook, I can assemble that. It stores under my passenger seat area and works pretty well. I don't have a refrigerator, and I have done videos on the hows and whys of all of that, but suffice to say that you do not need a refrigerator unless you are just desperate for cold things all the time, or if you have meat or certain things that need to be refrigerated. I learned this years ago when I was living off-grid in Bolivia without any kind of power whatsoever. For 5 years in the jungle, you do not need a refrigerator, but it's convenient to have one if you need one. I store my food in a cooler, even though I don't use ice or a cold pack or anything like that. It's just a convenient little way to keep them a little bit insulated. They don't need a lot of insulation. And then I just have a lot of fruits and vegetables hanging around all the time. It's totally doable, and I won't go into all of that right now. But if you do have a refrigerator, you are going to think about how you will keep that power on, because it does draw a lot of power. And that brings me to my next essential. Of course, when I'm caravanning with friends, we often share meals. And so we figure out the logistics of all of that, who's going to store what, who's going to buy what, and all of that. So the third essential element you'll need to think about is power. Free campsites won't have electrical outlets. So you'll need some type of portable charger or power brick or smaller solar charger to keep your devices charged. Or you may want to think of a larger solar panel on your roof with a battery array system, an inverter, if your needs are greater for power. I tend to have a lot of options though when it comes to smaller power sources, which I use to power my devices and lights. That way, if one of the methods goes out for one reason or another, I know that I can go to the next option and the next and the next. And if your car has them, you can use its USB and 12-volt ports. You just want to make sure that you don't run your car's battery down. But there are also little jumper cables that I have in case that happens. You just need to make sure that's charged. Knowing how to handle waste is essential when you are free camping or boondocking. Because there are often no toilets or latrines or even waste bins, you need to be prepared to pack everything, and I mean everything, out with you. Some people have composting toilets, which basically separates the solids from the liquids, and you add a composting agent to it, and over time it composts. Some vans and larger RVs have black tanks which store the waste until they can get to a dumping station to dispose of them. I don't have either, but I do separate my solids and my liquids. And when I'm in an area for a couple weeks and I have to carry it out, I've found that this is the simplest method to do so. I use these, which are biodegradable bags. They are smaller than normal ones because the container that I use for my solids is smaller, and these fit perfectly. And the thing is, when you have several of these over the course of time, you will need a place to have them so that they don't start smelling. And I really researched my options for that because I did plan on being in spaces where I would be boondocking for quite a while. And I looked at diaper bales, I looked at what people did when they're hiking or when they're boating. And the simplest option, which again for me is usually the best, is this. It is called Baby Gold, which is for babies, diapers, so you can imagine the smells that they need to hide. It's just a bag, but it is a waterproof bag, so it has this on the inside, which also doesn't allow moisture or smells to get through it. And then you simply will just continue to deposit things in here, and it zips shut and it keeps odors away. This is the material. You could also use a bear bag, and there are other storage bags that seal in odors so that you really cannot smell them. But this works. It's pretty cheap, and for me, it fits with what I have. And I imagine if I were in bear territory, I would get a bear canister and store all of that in that as well. But for where I'm usually at, this is sufficient for a couple weeks. And don't forget, you're going to need to carry out your trash as well, because there's usually no trash cans at areas way out in the middle of nowhere. So be prepared to do that. I have my trash bin, and I use biodegradable bags as well in my little trash can, and then I dispose of that in a dumpster when I can. I don't tend to have a lot of packaging because either I've gotten rid of it right at the beginning when I buy it. I usually rid myself of anything that has containers or boxes or things like that, and I just leave them at a dumpster or waste can there. I also have these little compostable bags for my biodegradable scraps that you've seen me use 100 billion times probably if you watch this channel. I love them. They usually trap the odors and things that come from scraps, and I don't get bugs that way with the scraps by just keeping it in here, and then I just keep it in my cabinet until I find a way to dispose of it. To dispose of the waste when you carry it out, you will usually find dumpsters in an area. If you have an app like iOverlander or Campendium, you can specifically look for dump sites. I also will use for my regular trash dumpsters at a large store or facility like that, a gas station, because they're used to getting trash there anyway, and I usually don't have a lot, so I feel okay dumping it in a large dumpster where that's appropriate. For human waste, it is another story. You are going to want to dispose of that at a dump site that is appropriate for that. And again, you can look on iOverlander or Campendium usually for dumpsters, and they will tell you where you can dispose of those things appropriately. A lot of people do it. They have to for their RVs. So you can usually find one. You'll begin to know where they are, usually on the outskirts of town or near a campground. So it's okay for you to go into a campground area where their dumping station is, ask permission to be able to throw out your human waste appropriately. For compost waste, it's a little more tricky, but there is a website called sharewaste.com. I'll leave a link for that. It basically has a map of everybody who is composting across the United States, not everybody, but everybody that's using their website, so that you can go and give them your compost. I don't always find one, and so if I don't, I will also just put this with my trash and dump it in a dumpster, because I feel pretty good about that, because I've done what I can to begin the composting process in my bag. So it's not always possible, but I do what I can, because obviously I don't have a compost pile in my van. Finally, you may want to have other gear with you so that it will make your experience more comfortable and enjoyable. If you don't have a table inside your vehicle or a handy dandy little tray like this, you will want to bring a camping table of sorts. Most free campsites won't have a picnic table available necessarily. So I have what I have had from the beginning, which I love, my bamboo camping table. It folds up so tiny and it stores under my bed. So that one has been useful for myself and for others when I'm in an area where they don't have a table. And you will definitely want to have a camp chair. I think everybody has one, and some people might have one to loan you if you don't have one, but it's pretty necessary gear to have. A hammock can be a great addition. I have one that can swing between trees. I store that up front there under my passenger seat area. And I have my beautiful hammock chair that I can attach to either side of my deck, because it has holes in there and I just use carabiners to attach it, and it holds my weight just fine. And it is a nice little addition when I just need somewhere to lounge around. Also, be sure to have whatever other gear you're going to need for the types of activities that you're going to be doing. And that is anything from the appropriate hiking shoes, backpacks. I tend to have everything in my van anyway, because it has everything that I own in it. So I am always prepared no matter what I do and all the activities that I like to enjoy. That's it for my top free camping essentials. If you have any must-have items that I have not already mentioned, please leave them in the comments below, because I'd like to see them. As always, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video. To find free public places to park, you can check out Campandium or iOverlander or publiclands.gov. Those will all have sites that will tell you where you can park for free, as well as national forest directories and maps.